So at least three of the speakers have talked about constraints and obstacles and the problems that winter can create for pedestrians and bicycles. And Kurt Wayne is going to talk to us about City of Minneapolis' current study and how the city is planning to tackle that issue and some of the things that they're thinking about. Kurt?
Thank you. Okay, there we go. All right. My name is Kurt Wayne. As I've been introduced already, I'm with the City of Minneapolis Public Works. I wanted to give a brief presentation to you guys in some detail today about the Minneapolis Pedestrian and Bicycle Winter Maintenance Study. And I've got kind of a subtitle here for you. We're really looking at this and how do we make all the pieces work? How do we coordinate this all together? How do we consider or sometimes reconsider our multimodal networks in wintertime? So I wanted to just give you a little bit of an overview because this is a study that's both exciting to work on because we're able to do more than we already are with our bicycle and pedestrian networks in the wintertime. And it's a study that's got some energy around the city too in terms of people are interested in this. And so it's kind of an exciting time to work on this topic. Okay, so stop me if you've heard this one before. Maybe you're at a public meeting or you're just having a conversation. You're talking about walking or bicycling and these modes of transportation and how people get around the city and how it works in neighborhoods. And the subject of wintertime or year-round usage comes up. And maybe there's one person, maybe there isn't, but there's a person that chimes in and says, you know, we do live in Minnesota, right? And there's kind of a dramatic pause too. And then you know that there's wintertime 3 months out of the year, 4 months out of the year. And you typically know too, if they say the wintertime lasts 6 or more months, they're really kind of against this in the first place. Just like, why are we talking about this? You know, what's the big idea here? Well, the big idea has to do with, again, sort of the theme of this conference. We want to reimagine how we view our city in the wintertime. And so in this case, we want to reimagine or really get back to basics in terms of how we get around in our neighborhoods. And for the longest time, it's been walking to get from A to B, or to get part of the trip from A to B is walking, and bicycling too. And so we know that we can't reimagine wintertime as a season. That's not going to change. We have no control over that. And we can't completely reimagine, all the practices and nuts and bolts, and let's completely revamp how winter maintenance works, in the city of Minneapolis. We can't really do that either. But we can take another step in reimagining how all of the transportation systems and how people, not just vehicles, but people, get from A to B and how we do that year round. And so that's really the impetus of this study. Another thing we have to consider when we're considering our sidewalks and our bike lanes and our bike facilities is that to maintain them, and particularly to maintain them in the wintertime, it takes a lot of everyday coordination, a lot of different departments and entities that factor into this. So obviously, one of the big ones for us with the city is our maintenance and repair department. They are the ones that do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to clearing our streets, clearing our bike lanes, clearing our protected bikeways, and I'll get into that a little bit more later. We've got regulatory services here too. It's listed because they also have a role in identifying where the abandoned properties are. So where we have gaps in sidewalk clearance, we can get to those gaps. Our 311 system in the city is kind of the main voice of the people, I suppose, or complaint system in terms of getting a ticket or an item into so-and-so, or I've noticed that their sidewalk is not clear here, or there's a problem with this bus stop or this intersection, or this bike lane needs some additional clearance. 311 is the point for that. Our communications department has a role to play, and an even bigger role, which I'll talk about in a minute, with getting the message out. And not just in terms of, there's a snow emergency tonight, better move your cars. Also getting the message out about what some of the expectations are for homeowners in the wintertime and what some of the things that we can do as a city and as residents in the wintertime with our transportation. What are the opportunities there too? I mention as well special service districts here. They don't play an active role necessarily in clearing sidewalks, but there are at least a dozen special service districts within the city that essentially create a different way that sidewalks can be cleared, not by individual property owners, but as a collective group. We have many external partners that factor in and help us with some of the maintenance and considerations in the wintertime. I know some of the big ones I can think of, but not all of them, are Minnesota Department of Transportation and Hennepin County, as well as Metro Transit. I've got this picture up here because it's a fun little scenario of, as you just look at it and suddenly you start to realize, okay, well, you've got a Metro Transit bus stop there, and it's at the intersection of a city road and a county road, and yes, it does exist in some sort of special service district. So how does all the maintenance work here? It gets a little complicated, it gets a little confusing, and then you add on top of that all the private property owners, and it's a complex system. And it's a system that is working well right now, but through this study, we're going to see how it can work even better. So briefly here, the goals of the winter maintenance study that the city of Minneapolis is conducting is we're going to take a look at other cities' winter maintenance activities to see some comparisons, to see some ways to do and think about things differently when it comes to clearing sidewalks and clearing bike lanes. And I've got a couple examples of those in this presentation near the end. We want to also understand our current city of Minneapolis practices when it comes to winter maintenance. We know a lot of them already, but we also want to assess how they really interact with each other and how we work within our own departments on the whole goal, really, of getting winter maintenance done in a timely manner for these modes, so that, you know, people that are walking, people that are biking can use that as transportation. And then we want to also consider or really determine the priorities, costs, and feasibility of winter maintenance. We want to take what we've learned through the study, not just through this study, but through other things that we've learned in the past too, and come up with some scenarios that can really tell us, give us a path for the future to make these transportation systems work better for people. I've got listed here too, something that kind of oversees a lot of the things that we think about and kind of is overarching on this study too is, as part of our complete streets policy, we have a modal priority framework. And really, we want to consider it as, you know, as it says in the modal priority framework, you know, pedestrians are sort of, or they are the top priority of how we view the transportation system, and then bikes and transit below that, and then automobiles. So we keep this in mind when we think about this study and we think about winter maintenance in our practices too. So to know a little bit more about winter maintenance here in Minneapolis, you have to kind of understand our system too. As you can see a little bit, or pretty well in this map here, we do have the traditional street grid style of system. We've got 235 miles of bikeways within the city, and it breaks down into protected bikeways, which do include off-street trails as well as on-street protected bikeways, bike lanes, bike boulevards, as well as some shared lane facilities, which can include some wide outside lanes. It includes a few different types of facilities. We have more than 1,700 miles of sidewalk, so this does become a challenge. More than 800 signalized intersections and 3,700 city-maintained crosswalks. So it's a big system to put together for everyone, but that is exactly the task that we're trying to do in this study, and we're continuing to try to do every time winter comes around. So I wanted to give a few examples about what we're learning in the study right now that's working well, at least already. And so this first example here is actually of one of our on-street protected bikeways. In this example, we've got actually city crews are out there right now, working on clearing the bikeway. I use this example because our maintenance department is viewing protected bikeways that are on street as essentially part of the street maintenance when it comes to snow mitigation, snow removal on that street. So what will happen here is that when the snow plows will come along first and sort of create some sort of windrows in that barrier area, what they also have is specialized equipment that comes around next to then clear out the protected bikeways specifically. And then if there is a lot of snow or too much snow in the buffered area or around the bollards, they have equipment then there too that can help clear the snow out of that area. So a higher priority is given to these protected bikeways, and it really shows in some of the clearance rates and how the protected bikeways can be used in the wintertime. I also wanted to indicate that the city also uses a lot of the same equipment to help clear out a lot of the windrows, a lot of the snow plow lines that you can see there at intersections within the city. I wanted to highlight another thing that works here, and this is the sort of snow clearance policy when it comes into complaints with 311. You can see how the system sort of works in terms of the graphic up here. But another thing I wanted to highlight is that within the past few months, actually, the city has streamlined this system so that it works even faster. You know, we have it's 24 hours for single family and duplexes to the responsibility of moving the snow from the sidewalks, and it's less than that for businesses. But we have control over how fast our process works too, and we've been able to streamline that so we can get compliance on our city sidewalks even faster. One other thing that is working well, and that has been a recent addition, or a recent enhancement, I should say, is our communications when it comes to winter maintenance on the sidewalks especially. It's not just messaging anymore about, it's time to move your vehicles. It's also messaging about, remember to shovel your sidewalks. Here's what the city policy is. Giving videos on multiple social media platforms about how the policies work, how you as a homeowner have a responsibility, and then several other topics including free sand for people this year was another thing that was added as something that we are striving to do everything we can, to make our sidewalks work better. So what's challenging here? This photo has, it's a picture of really just one corner of one intersection, but there's a few challenging things that I can at least identify here. For pedestrians, that's not a very accessible corner yet. And so I think one of our challenges that we'll look at is how do we make these intersections work even better for pedestrians. Another thing has to do with the bicycle realm here. As you can see, some of the freeze-thaw stuff has left that crust. A lot of times that can get left more often on bike lanes or in bike boulevards, because there aren't as many automobile tire tracks kind of smushing everything down and clearing everything out of the way. So we do have an additional problem that was identified also recently too by our Bicycle Advisory Committee. That and sort of the messaging too, like how do we know if this is here? Like we can't know until we get out there, and then we can get out there and we're slipping and sliding around. That's a major problem. So as I think has been mentioned a little bit before, some of the bus stops are still an issue. We have many, many bus stops within the city, and you get some of the snow mounds or the windrows that can happen when the plows go by. Also, the picture on the right is kind of depicting there are still weak links. If there's one or two residences on one block where the snow hasn't been cleared on a sidewalk, this is still problematic for people that really need that cleared and are trying to make the entire trip, on foot, or they have, mobility issues and can't easily just go out into the street and avoid this area. So we've been able to look a little bit about what other cities are doing. And I wanted to highlight briefly, the city of Vaughan is a suburb of the city of Toronto, but it has a population that is at least comparable to Minneapolis. They have a city-led snow clearance policy. So we're looking at their city as well as a few other cities in terms of, what does it take? What is their sidewalk mileage? How do they do it? We're looking at other cities too that have models that are similar to ours, such as Madison, and see some of the fine tweaks that they do in terms of this example here. They do work as well in terms of clearing windrows out, particularly for their multi-use trails in Madison, as well as they do some work too when it comes to pre-treating some of their roadways, as well as pre-treating some of their sidewalks and some of their multimodal paths. So there's a lot of interesting data that other cities are doing. Obviously, it doesn't always compare apples to oranges, population, the weather. It is a little bit different, but we're able to get a lot of new information from that. As I conclude here, the next steps for this study are we're going to document further our own current practices. Like I said, how does it all fit together? We want to identify and evaluate some of these budget impacts. We want to get to some detailed level that's really going to inform us, all of us as the city of Minneapolis. How can we make this work? How can we make this work better? And we're going to look at some of those different scenarios, in terms of what does the scenario look like for a priority pedestrian network? What does that look like for a priority bicycle network? What does the scenario look like where the city leads some form of sidewalk clearance? We're going to look at different scenarios and see how they all work together and see if we can make this all work together. So I think the big takeaway from this presentation is we just want to make sure that this is continuing to be our focus. Our focus is around people, and it's around people year-round when it comes to getting from point A to point B, and that's exactly how we have our study focused in Minneapolis. So thank you very much.